All right. Welcome to episode 4 of the Parenting Together podcast. This is our second episode in our series on discipline. I'm joined here by our hosts, David Bost, Tony Ficus, and Ruth Pingle again. We looked in the last episode and we talked about the heart of discipline. If you haven't listened to that, I would recommend listening to that before this one, because it really covers the core of some of the things we're going to talk about. This episode is going to focus on some questions that came in on specific methods of discipline. So we're going to look at that, but I want to start with a general question here. If we believe in parenting together, which we do, which is why we're doing this podcast, how do we handle parenting together in the area of discipline, especially where we know there might be disagreements with methods or approaches?
Yeah. Well, I can take a stab at that one, I guess. Just thinking back over the time when my kids were young and needed lots of discipline, we wanted to parent together. And so, when we would be with other people in other homes, other situations, or out and about together, there are some things where, as Christians, they're obvious, they're going to be acceptable across the board. Other things that are going to be obvious and unacceptable across the board. And then I think there are those things that are in between, where it's personal preference or based on the experience of the parents, that this isn't going to fly in their house. And I think where the scripture is clear about it, then we can all join together on that.
Yeah.
And we should do what the scripture says. In the places where you maybe don't have a specific scriptural example for it, that's a place where there is some room. And it's important to recognize the autonomy of each family, I think, and being able to decide things that are going to be helpful or not helpful for their kids. But there's also blind spots. We always talk about blind spots. And so there's a lot of wisdom in both speaking and hearing to other families and from other families when there are things that they see. I know we don't do it that way in our family. You do it that way in your family. Have you thought about what the result of this might be down the road? That if you allow this in your child now, it might turn out that way. Because they may have a different reason for allowing something and then have not considered, this is going to produce, in the last episode, I mentioned playful banter back and forth with your kids and trying to get the one up. And sometimes that's fun. And you might think this is just evoking good natured, a wonderful relationship between the two of us. But it might take somebody from the outside coming in and saying, well, yes, but do you realize your child is actually being very disrespectful when they talk to you that way? There's a way to have fun and banter back and forth, but then when it crosses the line of disrespect, what do you as a parent do? We don't always get those decisions right. And so having somebody else be able to speak into that, I think, is really important. So I would say where scripture is clear, we all should align with each other. And then where it's unclear, there's some wiggle room for people to make their own decisions. But I think if we're going to do it together, David still gets to talk to us about what we're doing with our kid, and even if we might disagree on it, that's the messy, wonderful work of relationships. That's what the church is that we disagree, but we don't leave each other. We stick together and we work it out until we find that place of common ground so that we can move forward together.
Yeah. Other thoughts from you guys on approaches you would take to that?
I think we have to be humble.
Yeah.
And not take offense when people come and point out things. Or because if we say we're going to live life together and be a community together, and somebody has a different perspective, it sometimes can catch us well, who are you to come tell me how to parent? Even if you've been parenting 10 years longer than the person that's coming to you and you have way more experience, there might be that one little grain of truth that the Lord's trying to tell you
Mhm.
about how you're parenting that you
Mhm.
need to be humble enough to receive, and humble enough in how you bring it.
True.
Sure.
During the
Yeah.
parenting conference or gathering, I remember Ruth saying, hey, be humble when you bring it.
Right.
Be humble when you receive it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We shouldn't come to each other with fingers pointing, you're not doing this right.
Right. No.
No, that's not the goal.
Right.
The goal is for us to raise our kids together, to love God
Mhm.
together. So if I see something and somebody else doesn't, and I can see further down the road than them, and they maybe haven't considered that, then I should bring it, but because I want to see them do well, not because I want to be right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And so
Yeah.
part of parenting together is not trying to be the one that's always got the right
Right.
answer.
Yeah.
It's coming together and knowing we're going to make mistakes together, and we're going to need to build together
Right.
in the process.
So personal when somebody comes and talks to you about your kids. I
Sure.
mean, there are very few things that feel more like sacred and untouchable than how I'm parenting, because that just feels
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it's so core.
Yeah.
And we get so prickly as parents. But I mean, there are a lot of different reasons I think why that could be, but ultimately we have to understand that we are not enough for our kids.
Yep.
They're not going to be who they're supposed to be if it's just me and Jeremy
Right.
raising them. They've got to have other people looking in on things, being able to see their life, speaking to them directly, but also speaking to us to talk to us about how we parent. It's kind of like finances. Like, you don't want anybody looking into your
Sure,
finances.
yeah.
Like, just keep that separate. Like, you can disciple me in all these other areas, but I'm just going to lead my finances. However, we kind of feel that way about parenting too. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's right. I think
Right.
that is, we really need to have that open with each other. And that's why it's important both in how you're humble in how you bring things, but also humble in how you receive things. You don't have to agree with everyone to receive it
Sure.
humbly and then to take it before the Lord. Because, I mean, goodness, blind spots all over the place.
Yeah.
This is one of the hallmarks, I think, of a relational church or a family church.
Yeah.
And we want to be a family.
Yeah.
Well, and family's messy. You know,
It
it just
Mhm.
kind of is. It is my experience. And so you put families together to be a bigger family. It's like, it's going to be messy also.
Right.
But the fact that, you know, if we, this kind of is like a key thing to see in churches that are striving to be a family and try to be relational, is that
Mm.
working through the stuff with our children and you know, how we raise them is like, this is a good indicator of how well we're being a relational church in some ways.
Right.
Mm.
I've been on the receiving end of that situation where somebody came to Patty and I about one of our children. This goes back, it's important to have your children around other situations and
Yeah.
other parents and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of a school,
That's right.
because people see they see things about your children that you don't always see at home. In
That's
terms
right.
of, and somebody came, it's like,
Mhm.
did you know this about one of your children? It's like,
Mhm.
it was like, oh no, really? You know, and it's like, it was not a good thing. And it's like, okay, we took that to heart and we started working on that. And it was like that person had good intent. It's like, hey, I pointed it out to you, just like, you know, do you see that? And it was like, no, I didn't really see
Yeah.
that, you know? And it's like, we just have blind spots. And
It
we
works the other way too. I remember the first year that I ever taught, having parent-teacher conferences and telling one of the sets of parents how much of a leader their child was in our class, and just how like impressive they were, and how they were the first to pray, and they were such a good moral example for the kids. And they were like, our kid, that's not what they're like at home. I can't believe what you're telling me. This is so confusing. I'm like,
Johnny?
little Johnny. And I had never seen this child other than
Right.
a strong, good influence, moral leader. The parents wouldn't have known that if they had just had their, children separated from other relationships.
Yeah.
So it works both ways. You could get good news too.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, there's probably also a thing we have to realize in when we're saying receiving this humbly too, that receiving doesn't always mean you're applying the
True.
feedback. So there is, you're responsible for your kid, right? You might get
Take it before the Lord.
bad advice, you take it before the Lord, but
Mhm.
if you receive it humbly, you're creating that relational atmosphere.
That's exactly right.
And I think there needs to be, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think whether you apply it or whether you disagree with it, I think we have a responsibility to wrap back around that conversation, even and say, hey, thought about what you said. We're trying something different with that. Or, hey, thought about
Mhm.
what you said. maybe we disagree on this. Both of those can be humbling or
Mhm.
uncomfortable conversations,
Mhm.
but it keeps that relational door open.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the next question, let's just ask the big one first, because this is the grand poobah of discipline. So, should parents spank their children? And we know who has all the answers, and you can't see it on this, but we're all pointing at Tony. So, Tony.
Well, before we started the podcast, I told him I grew up in the generation where there was a book out by a person by the name of Dr. Spock. And it's like he just poisoned the water for a whole generation, told them it's like it was awful to spank your children. You should never do that kind of stuff. And a whole generation of parents read that and applied that. And it's like you talk about a rebellious generation that came out of that, in terms of all the mess we see in the 60s and 70s and all the crazy stuff that came out. It's like children that were raised that were never spanked, basically. And I was like, that was really bad. And this is one of those places where you go, culture should not be influencing us about how to raise our children in the church. I mean, it's like it's bad enough what it's doing to society in general. And so when people get saved and they come in out of that culture, it's good for us to know that. But it's like, I go with Proverbs. It says, you don't do that, and it's like you're destroying your child basically, and it shows that you don't love them. And so we should never look to the world in terms of how to raise our children. We should look to the Bible. We should work through it together as Christians and parents and talk about some of these things about how this looks in your family or mine in terms of working this out. But we need a standard, not the standard is the Bible. It's not Dr. Spock or the whatever the latest new book that comes out about raising your children, being friends, right? You want to be friends with your child. You want to be their best buddies and all that stuff like that. I go, that's a bunch of garbage. Just like, see how that works out when they get older. It's like, it's like, this is going to be a mess. The Bible doesn't talk about that way. I am an authority in my home. We did not vote.
Yeah.
But that comes out too sometimes in parenting. It's like, well, all your children should have a voice in what you do and your decisions. And I go, are you kidding me? I'm the parent and I'm responsible. It's like, we're not voting in my house. So it's like, I want my kids to grow up that way. There is such a thing as spiritual authority and spiritual responsibility that goes with it. And so, so next.
Is spanking the be all end all, Tony? Does that work in every situation, every time? And if you just keep spanking your child over and over again, they'll just turn out perfect?
No, and I think on the last podcast, I mentioned the fact that all your children are individuals, and they respond totally different to the issue of consequences. And so you have to know your child. Some children are very tenderhearted and really move to repentance quickly. Others, not so much at all. It takes a lot. You keep working on them. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's trying to find out. You're trying to find what it is that takes that moves the needle inside of them to not want to do certain behavior anymore. And so the Bible, I think it's interesting that God created us in a certain way. The Proverbs tells us that spanking has a certain effect. That's good. So it's like it's has the ability to break a cycle or do something, reset something, which I don't think in the natural we just realize that would happen that way.
That's really good.
But it's like there's something about that since it's mentioned that way. The spanking has an effect that nothing else will have. Putting them in the corner will not do the same thing as spanking. But it's reserved for certain kind. Usually it's reserved for rebellion. When there's rebellion, it's like you tell your child to do something, they look at you defiantly and say no. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Like we just crossed the line there, and we're gonna work on that one. So,
well, and to your point, this is a reference point because I hear it come up in this conversation often. You reference Proverbs, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child. Understanding biblical context is important to understand that's not a metaphorical rod. That's not the same Hebrew word used to talk about a shepherd's rod. It was a specific word to use that a Hebrew audience would have understood. This is a rod set aside for the spanking of children. So
with a smiley face on it.
With a smiley face on it. In our home, we call it Mr. Spanky.
Mr. Spanky.
And you talk about different children. This made me feel like a bad dad, but different kids. I noticed with one kid, I can flick my wrist and hit the outside of her pants, and she's going to break down and cry and say sorry. And it's like, I don't think I even needed to pick this up. other children who will run to the room, grab the spoon, and they will be spanking themselves by the time I get in there. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, in situations where you find spanking as a method not working, can you guys just talk about some of the different or creative ways you have
Mhm.
used for consequences for your children? I'll throw that to David first because he's got a smile on his face.
There are all kinds of things. I mean, sometimes it's your child's being disrespectful to their mother, and you're having that trouble over and over. So you begin to pull things like basketball or going to a friend's house that night. It's not that you want to do that, but sometimes it takes something to get their attention to say, oh, this is not an okay behavior.
Mhm.
And so sometimes you do things like that. Sometimes my kids lost the opportunity to play video games
Mhm.
because if you can't treat your mom right,
Mhm.
or you can't do what I'm asking you without arguing with me,
Mhm.
you haven't earned the privilege
Mhm.
to play the game. It isn't even that I'm trying to be mean and take the game away. We talked about it as you didn't earn the privilege to do this
Mhm.
because you haven't been able to do these things that are
Yeah.
expected of you,
That's good.
that are righteous things. I'm not going to reward you with this over here
Mhm.
because you can't do that. I mean, sometimes I made my kids clean.
Mhm.
When I had a child that didn't threw fits about doing the dishes, well, we didn't just do the dishes that night.
Mhm.
That child and I cleaned the whole kitchen
Yeah.
because I didn't make them do it alone.
Mhm.
I became part of,
Mhm.
and we had conversations while we did it.
It's good.
Very good.
But I also wanted them to understand you really had it pretty easy. This one thing wasn't that bad. Now you have a whole lot more, and we're going to work through it. But
Mhm.
you're going to see that doing the dishes isn't so bad, and you can do it next time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's lots of creativity for people.
Just a short one. If you choose the right alternate situation,
Mhm.
I've had my child. It's like, don't you want to just spank me?
Yeah.
I knew I hit it.
That's really good. Yeah.
Can't digest.
I had one child that so wanted to please us and do the right thing that a spanking or the threat of a spanking was all it would take. And then there was, complete turn, heart, she's on board, we're moving forward. I had another child who didn't so much mind the spanking, but is a people person. And so if they got sent to their bed and couldn't be around everybody, well, then it was, oh, I'll shape up, but let me back out. Another child just was really hard-headed and needed a combo, needed like the spanking and you're going to be in your room until you can get a hold of yourself, and possibly and you're not going to get to play video games or whatever, but that combo would turn. Had another child that no matter what we did, there no compliance, zero compliance. And I had to learn with that one that I needed to pick my battles because I had to win, because it was a battle of wills. And at first I thought, well, I can just keep spanking or applying this punishment. I can hold out longer than they can. And the truth of the matter is no. Like, I'm so tired of dealing with you. After an hour of the same thing over and over and over, can we move on? Like, I don't want you to be in constant condemnation of this thing. I want you to get over it and come back and be restored so we can. And so I had to like decide, not redraw lines of what's good and what's bad, but redraw like my expectations. So if it was, I want this particular child with this particular situation was young and it was staying in your crib when I put you into bed. So this is a 2 or 3 year old kid. And they would climb out of their crib and then they would play in their room, and then they would come out and they would come down the hallway and I would take them and I would put them back in bed. Don't get out of bed again or you're going to get a spanking. The kid would be out playing in their room and then they would come out again. And so give them the spanking, put them back, same over and over and over and over again. And so I realized I'm losing this because they can do what they want to do in the bedroom. and I'm not there to stop them from it. So then I was like, well, I'll just pull my chair down into the hallway and sit in front of their door so that as soon as they pop that door open, you can do all of those
Right.
things. But the point is I was losing the battle because that spanking for that, where their heart, is a heart issue, the hardness of their heart, that spanking wasn't doing anything for them repeatedly. And you don't beat your children. Like, spanking is not the same thing as
Right,
hitting.
right.
Spanking is not the same thing as beating your child.
Yeah.
And so we had to redraw the lines where it was, all right, you do not leave this room.
Mm.
And so maybe you're going to be in your room and you're going to be having quiet time, but you're not going to come out of this room. Some people could look at that and say, well, you let your kid win. Well, the point is they're going to sleep when they are tired. They're going to sleep and I put them to bed earlier that night because they were tired. So
Sure.
they lost out on that time, with the family, being able to be with everybody. Again, they're 2 or 3. They don't exactly know what's happening, but I was able to then win because, yeah, you're not coming out. You stay in there, you fool around. Okay, fine. You can control that. But I am ultimately in charge. And so I think that's important too. That
Sure.
like, it's not like asserting your dominance or being the alpha or,
Boundaries, though.
but it is. I can't let them win. I can't let their will be more powerful than my will.
Yes.
But sometimes I can't fight that same battle that they're choosing. So I just say, well, I'm not going to fight that fight just because you want to fight it. I'm going to pick this fight over here that I know I can win. And then I'm going to win that fight every single time.
Yeah.
Eventually, that child gave their life to Jesus, and completely different experience
yeah.
parenting a child that is unsaved compared to parenting a child that is saved. And so
Yes.
that's the moment that you're waiting for, because
Right.
no matter how good I am or how consistent I am, it's not going to save the child. Jesus is going to save the child. And so all I can do is be there patiently, holding the reins, holding the lines together so that Jesus can meet them. And then it's a totally different
Yeah.
ballgame.
I mean, at some level, stubbornness is not always a bad thing. And that may be a trait that we have to have
Yeah.
as parents in
True.
sticking with discipline and consistency.
True.
I could literally talk for hours about methods of discipline. I'm well versed in methods of discipline, not as a parent, but on the other end. And I don't want to spoil a future episode that I'm going to try to do with Roger Moore, the Chronicles of a Life Church Principal. But I
Wow,
can
that's a
share
good
one that speaks to this. Is I remember spankings were not working on me in school anymore. I had probably outgrown it, and it just wasn't getting my
Mhm.
attention. And Roger was very creative in finding that thing that poked my will. And so one day he gave me a push broom and told me, you're not going to go to recess. You're going to go clear all the gravel off the blacktop next to the modulars by the building. I was like, all right. And he's coordinating with my dad through all this right now. So this wasn't just a free labor situation, right? But I get out there, and in my mind, it's my will versus Roger's as my little 15-year-old self.
Mhm.
And I cleared that whole blacktop clean as could be. I was supposed to be doing it all week. Cleared it off in one afternoon. That day I'm getting picked up, and I went in all smug and prideful and told Roger I was done. And then that day I'm walking to my car in the pickup line, and I look down the parking lot, and Roger's out there with a leaf blower blowing all that gravel back onto the blacktop. And there was something in there that showed me, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to outwill this guy. But also on a serious note, it did communicate something to me. The more I've thought about it and thought about it over the years, was like how much, even though it was a little bit of a battle of wills, how much care was in an
Yeah.
act like that.
Yeah.
He had to get out of his office,
Yeah.
go gas up the leaf blower, get out there. And it wasn't because he was trying to show me up. It was like, because if you know Roger, he wants to see you grow. He wants to
Yeah.
see you better. So
Yeah.
methods upon methods can work, but the idea, like we talked about in the last episode, is where are we producing a broken heart in our child towards the Lord in the methods we use. So here's a different question. Should grandparents discipline their grandkids? What does that relationship look like?
Good question.
I can leave it to the grandparents to start, and then me and Ruth can weigh in after.
Us youngins.
Yeah.
Definitely grandparents need to discipline. You don't just spoil the children and then send them home. As much as we like to hear those sayings and say those kinds of things, and we do some of that, but the bigger thing is to be in a close relationship with your children and their spouse so that you're helping parent the way they're parenting.
It's really
One
good.
of the things you have to be careful of as a grandparent is that you don't override a parent.
Mm.
If you start disciplining in ways they're not disciplining and you're taking the lead when they're at your house, that's not good.
Mm.
They need to lead and you need to support.
Yeah, that's really
You
good,
need to
David.
come up under and be there for them. If you see something that's off, go to them first and have a dialogue, because you may find that they have some different ideas about parenting that particular child
Mhm.
than you do.
Right.
And that's something that even Jody and I learned as having grandchildren, is we wanted to make sure that we didn't take the place of mom and dad
Mhm.
doing what God's asked them to do.
Because you're an expert. So it's hard, like you know what I mean? Like
We raised 5
you're-
kids.
You guys are brand new. You've never done this before. We've
Right.
raised 5 kids. Like, yeah, so that could be, I could see that being an issue. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't want them to defer to us either,
mm-hmm.
because we have raised kids.
Yeah.
And my son looks at me and goes, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No. Your job is to parent. You're the
Yeah.
one that's accountable.
Yeah.
You're the one
Yeah.
that's going to stand before God for what you did. But we do have to help, and especially if they entrust them to us for an overnight stay or things
Mhm.
like that, we want to parent them the same way they would parent them. And if we have a difference, that's where you need to sit down and be willing to have a dialogue.
Yes.
True.
Hey, have you thought about this?
Mhm.
You might, this way of discipline isn't really going to change their heart, and they're not responding to you real well. Can I give you some
Mm.
thoughts and
Mhm.
ideas?
Mhm.
Not tell them what to do,
Mhm.
but present it in a way that they can think about it and weigh it before the Lord and find their path.
Yeah.
Because they do have to find their own path, because they are responsible.
Mhm.
That's good.
Tell you, one of the things that I appreciate when our children come over and they drop the kids off, kind of thing like that. One of the, this is consistent across the board, is that they'll say they'll talk to the children and say, now you need to obey granddad and grandmom while we're not
Mhm.
here, kind of things like that, and treat just like you would us, kind of stuff like
Mhm.
that. You understand,
Yeah.
kind of thing like that.
Mhm.
And they'll check when they come to pick them up. How
Mhm.
did they behave?
Mhm.
Did you have any issues? And I go, because this communication process is key to,
Yeah.
like we know that we have permission, like if something was not really good, we could spank them, it's like we would do the same things they would do, kind of thing.
Mhm.
But it's like I appreciate that the children get to hear that on the front end, that it's
Mhm.
like there's a dialogue between grandparents and parents, and the child's like, oh they're on the same board here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to get away with something I couldn't get away with at home, kind of
Mhm.
situation. And then the fact that they know there'll be a question on the back end: how did they behave?
Mhm.
It's like, and
The
we're going to talk
check-in.
about that. So it's like,
Mhm.
it sets it up for success. How about that on the front end? And that we're on the same page, kind of things like that. And I think it makes the child feel more relaxed in terms of, can I get away with something, with the
Right.
grandparents that I couldn't get away with at home? It's like,
Right.
oh no, that's not going to happen here,
Mhm.
kind of issue. And so,
Mhm.
so they're like, so it's just, it's more normal. How about that? So
Yeah.
a lot of dialogue is important in this process.
You guys are talking about serving your kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is what you're
Right.
saying. Like,
Right.
it's not your job to raise your grandchildren.
Right.
It's your kids' job to raise your grandchildren. So what you're doing is serving them
Right.
so that they can do the best job that they can. You said something interesting about the discipline process. You said because we have their permission.
Yes.
And I think that that's really important. Sometimes I've seen where grandparents don't have the permission, but have the inward permission to deal with their children and to dole out spankings or to withhold things or to send the kid to bed without supper or, whatever they think is appropriate. The parent finds out about that. And then the parent is like, we would never have done that. Or we don't want you to be the disciplinarian. We want you just to spoil our kids. We don't want you to.
Yeah.
And then it's like that opens the door. Then you've got to have conversation about that. Do you think that in every situation, parents should give the right to spank? We'll just say, because that was the question.
Sure.
Do you think that in every situation, parents should give that right to grandparents?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Because you
I
could
don't
have
either.
situations, well, you could have grandparents that are not Christians, that don't have the same
Yeah.
Sure.
values that you
Yeah.
do, where this process we've talked about, they have no idea about this
Yeah.
process whatsoever. It means
Yeah.
totally different things to them.
Yeah.
And potentially that parent that was raised by them, right, knows that situation kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so it's like, yeah, so they don't give permission.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll even talk about that to that
Mhm.
person. It's like, while they're here with you, here's some boundaries in
Yep.
terms of that. And
Yes, yeah.
And they set
Mhm.
boundaries with their parents about things like that.
Mhm.
Sad that it has to be that way,
Right.
but I think it's better to do that than have some bad misunderstandings.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
I would speak to the flip side, obviously not as a grandparent or anywhere near. But if you do have believing grandparents, take advantage of the resource.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, my wife and I look at our life. Nobody releases us more into doing what God has for us in this season than my parents have. They're
So
my kids'
awesome.
grandparents, right?
Right.
They've taken them over weekend trips so that we could go to Mexico and see
Mhm.
Rafa and the crew down there every Tuesday night. My mom sits up from about 6 to 10 o'clock with our kids so that we can go be a part of the college group and
Mhm.
serve in that area. One, I'm just incredibly grateful for my parents in doing that. But also, we've talked about how parenting together relationship is such a huge part. How much more with grandparents? Like,
Mm,
Yeah.
my dad
that's great.
has an individual relationship with each one of my kids.
Mhm.
And one thing I've always appreciated about how he's done things is that he has never challenged my authority in front of them, even though they're little. He'll wait till they run into the other room and says, "Hey, you shouldn't let that attitude go.
Mm.
Hey, like, you were distracted by what you were doing. If you let that attitude go, it's going to hurt you down the road." I think little things like that,
That's
as a
awesome.
parent, that means a lot to me. I can
Yeah.
receive it a lot easier when I don't think I'm being, shown up in front of my
Yeah, that's good.
So
kiddo.
good. So good.
Can I say something about one of the things as grandparents that we have to remember is we have to remember what it was like when we first started parenting.
Mm,
Sometimes because we've raised kids and now we have grandchildren, we want our children to parent like they're us and have all of our
all your
experience,
experience. Yeah.
Mm.
and they don't. And so you
Good.
have to learn to be
Oh,
patient.
and watch them make mistakes.
You have to let them have that room.
Mhm.
They have to,
Mhm.
they as a couple have to figure out how they're going to
So
parent on the
good.
same page.
Yeah.
You can't tell them to do that, and you can't force them into that, and you can't overstep and overreach while they're learning that. You have to let them grow.
That's good. That's
Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on our time here. And I'll throw out one last question. I also wanted to just swing around. I think it's appropriate to, we made the caveat of where maybe you shouldn't allow grandparents to administer punishments like spanking.
Mhm.
I think there's probably a couple worth noting on the spanking issue in particular. If you lack self-control
Mhm.
and you have a temper, that might be something you have to consider taking off the table for yourself so you don't
Mm.
cross a line,
Mm.
especially if that's your only tool in the tool bag. I think that's a fair one to throw out
Or
there.
letting your spouse do it.
Or letting your spouse do it,
Mhm.
incorporating that in another way. The other one, and this is specific, but if you have a child or a foster child or an adoptive child that
Mhm.
has an abusive past, one, they need discipline more than other children do.
Mm.
Every stat is going to show children of abuse need more structure, not
Mm.
less. So more discipline, not less, is going to actually help them. But obviously, if
That's
they've
good.
come from a situation where they've been physically abused, like, we're not saying that this is the only tool in the
Right.
toolbox, like we've said on a couple occasions, but those are a couple where I'd say those are caveats that I think are important to take into
Mhm.
account with
Yep,
this
very
too.
good.
So
Yeah, I give one other caveat also is like, if say the mom's at home, the dad's working, the child misbehaves, it's like it's not very helpful sometimes to say when your dad gets home.
Yeah.
It's like
Mhm.
sometimes the child's forgot, what did I even do? By the
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
dad gets home.
Mhm.
And then it's like if dad's the only one that disciplines, it's like he gets to
Mhm.
be the bad person all the time in
Mhm.
situations. It's like I'm not sure that's the healthiest way to do some of those. So
Mhm.
removing the consequences too far from the
Yep.
actions
Yep.
is difficult for
Yeah,
for small
for
children.
little kids. Yeah.
And then making one parent the disciplinarian and the other one never being one is not a good scenario, I
Yeah.
don't think.
Which
Agreed.
that leads well into our final question, actually, here for the next couple minutes. What do you do in a scenario where it would not be appropriate to discipline your kid in the moment, like a spanking or something? You're in a church setting or wherever that might be. Maybe that's the question: is where is the inappropriate situation? But what do you do in those scenarios so you don't put too much time between it and cause a disconnect?
I saw something a long time ago when I was parenting young children that it was another mom telling a story of how she handled kids acting out in grocery store. And her point was, your child has to know that there isn't anything in your life that's more important than making sure that they obey or making sure that they behave the right way. And because kids use those other those third spaces, like they use those other places to try and get away with things that they couldn't get away with normally. And she said that more than once she has left a cart full of groceries that she spent an hour in the store with her kids, and left it and grabbed her purse and walked away with her child so she could take her kid outside to the car, go home to the restroom to, deal with them, whatever. And then had to go and redo all of the shopping after that. But it was important for her it was important that her children understood that there was no way they were going to get away with acting like this, and that mom and dad were dedicated to doing whatever it took to make sure that they were consistent on that all the way through. And so I think, where would that be? That there is a,
Right.
where you can't discipline. I mean, maybe you don't do it right then and there, but maybe you just take the child by the hand and you excuse yourselves
Yeah,
and you
that's
go
good.
somewhere else, privately. There's generally a restroom around somewhere. There's usually your car that you've come in. I mean, there are places that you can go to deal with things if it gets to that magnitude of disobedience.
I think once the boys thought that they always on vacations and stuff in the car, this could be an
Yeah.
interesting situation, that they did not think the dad would stop the vehicle because they were acting up. And I remember it's like they got the warning,
That's
and it's
awesome.
like they would not. We're pretty far out of town at this point, and it's like, okay, I said, if this is the last one. It's like, you do this, I'm going to stop the van, and we're going to have, we're going to talk, we're going to deal with this. And it's like they did it again. I stopped the van. I had them get out of the van. It's like, I think we only did that one time though.
Yeah.
I think that one
right?
time is like, oh, dad would stop the van on a vacation and deal with us if we don't obey. And it was
Yep.
like, oh yeah, I will.
Yep.
We did, and they didn't happen again.
Yep.
That goes back to the consistency
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
talked about early on. It's being consistent in every circumstance.
Yeah, there might be scenarios where it's inappropriate to do it right there. But like you guys are saying, I think there's always ways. The one my wife and I always run into is our girls love to dance around the front at church on Sunday, but they know the rules. They can be on the first step. And if they go up to that second step, I'm going to pull them off one time, give them a chance. And if they go back up on it again, you might see me exit out the kitchen door to go
Yeah.
administer some discipline. Inconvenient,
That's good.
miss a moment, mess up my worship flow. Yes, but like you said, it's got to be
Yeah.
to show them what's most important.
Because you love them.
I would
Yeah.
say if the question is saying if you're not the parent, like if it's someone
Mm.
else's child and you're in childcare or you're in a
Sure.
daycare or something, and you don't have, spanking as an option, I think that is a wholly different scenario.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not there to be the parent. You are there to be the teacher. And there are differences between the job of a parent and the job of a teacher. Even like when I teach my kids piano, I had to remember, okay, they're going to have a lot of fun if I treat them as a student, because I have a lot of fun with my students and my students love me. if I bring all of our history as mom and child together when they play their wrong note or when they give me an attitude, and I don't give them the fun response that I would give as a teacher, then I'm just going to make this one more thing, one more battle that we have to fight. And so I think being a teacher in that moment, it's okay that you are not going to spank
Right.
the child in
Right.
your care. It's okay that you have other methods. Hopefully there are outlined, ways of disciplining, but at the end of all of those, there should be an ultimatum of, and now you go home, or,
Right.
and now mom comes and picks you up and
Right.
you are removed from the situation, because you have to have a finality
Right.
where it's like, yep, this is that. Because that is what when you were talking about rebellion, when they say no, like, well, that gets a spanking. There has to be that final, this is the end
Right.
of this. We're coming to the end of this. So
I've had it more than once where I've gotten a tap on the shoulder from a child care worker telling me I needed to come back to deal with one of mine. So I think can't be afraid to pull the parents in on some of those
Yeah,
things.
that's right. Yeah.
That's an important part. The parents are still there,
right.
and
Right.
you need to lean on them. It doesn't matter if it's the daycare. It doesn't matter if it's the school. It doesn't matter if it's childcare on
Mhm.
Sunday.
Mhm.
If it crosses certain lines of rebellion and things like that, parents have to be involved.
Yep.
Because they have to bring not only the discipline, but they have to be able to do the ongoing work
Right. Right.
that isn't just in that one
Right.
moment, so that the next time they're in your classroom or the next time they're in childcare, that changes. And so, yeah, some of those things are only mainly for the parents.
Yeah.
Right. Well, as we wrap this episode, I just want to leave it with this as well as I think all of us sitting at this table would agree that heart outweighs method when it comes to discipline. If we find the heart of God, we will find the method that is going to work to discipline our kids. So these are meant to be ideas to throw out there, options, tools in the tool bag, if you will. And as always with these episodes, if you have questions, reach out to one of these guys that has been giving these answers. And I know these guys would be more than willing to have a conversation. But this was helpful. This is helpful to me as a parent of young kids. I'm walking away with some ideas. So thank you guys for your time. And we'll call this a wrap on
Thanks,
episode
Ryan.
4.
It's good.
Thanks.